That music was brought to you and played by Steve Miller, my brother-in-law, and produced by Lainey Miller, my niece. So in today's episode of Outside Insights, I'm hosting Brian Matthew Rhodes, Esquire. Brian is a civil rights attorney and the chief legal officer and corporate secretary with Opportunity at Work. Opportunity at Work is a leading not-for-profit social enterprise with the primary mission to rewire the labor market so that workers who are skilled through alternative routes or STARS can learn, earn, and prosper in the same way that folks that go to college. I've known Brian a long time. Prior to joining Opportunity at Work, he's had several positions in his legal career, senior attorney in the Labor and Employment Division with the City of Philadelphia Solicitor's Office. He's been chief legal officer and corporate secretary for several nationwide behavioral health businesses. And where Brian and I met, he was in-house counsel for Sunoco and head of HR for, I think, 5 refineries, if I recall. And then my favorite part, if I recall, about you that you like to give back, and you teach and you guest lecture, and you've guest lectured around the country at places like Cornell, I think it's Villanova, and I think at Temple. Well, welcome to Outside Insights, and thanks for joining, Brian.
Chris, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. This is outstanding. Thank you so much. I
appreciate it. So I think it would, I've got 60,000 people that don't hang up on me. What I think I've found that Outside Insights stands for is really helping people close their personal and professional gaps. So we just try and talk about things. I can't think of anything more appropriate than that than Opportunity at Work. Would you just talk about the organization a bit, how it got started, what its mission is, and your role in the business?
Perfect. Sure thing. And you really already touched on it, Chris. You gave a great synopsis of what we do. I'll just piggyback on that a little bit more. We definitely push the mission of STARS, people who are skilled through alternative routes, people who lack a college degree but have, through their own enterprise, either by virtue of getting a certificate, going to community college, military, oftentimes just by on-the-job work experience, have gained skills, have gained the knowledge that they need in order to complete the task of the job that they're working at. We push that agenda for these individuals because oftentimes they've been either not hired or not promoted, not moved along, not given opportunities within their jobs or within their workplaces to move ahead in the company. So we try to educate employers by pushing all types of insights, all types of data, by my job, which is general counsel, by letting them know the legal risk of not having a STARS-based talent strategy, by having a blanket college degree requirement, what kind of risk that imposes on or could impose on a company. So that's our agenda. We were started in 2015 by our founder, Byron Auguste. Byron is a former McKinsey employee. He was first director, I believe. But don't hold me to that. All 60,000, please don't hold me to that.
It's all good. Don't worry. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll put that in show notes. We'll confirm that for you. So regardless of what it is, we'll get it right there if that's cool.
Perfect. Yeah. And he was a Obama appointee, White House appointee, worked in the Obama White House for 2 years. And it was actually through his affiliation with the White House with Obama that he started this organization called Tech Hire. Tech Hire then, after a couple of years, 2017 to be exact, turned into Opportunity at Work. And Opportunity at Work is a social enterprise nonprofit whereby we hope to rewire the labor market. I mean, that's a grand scheme, that's a moonshot, but you'll see. I think you've noticed we've gained a little bit of momentum. I mean,
I absolutely think you have. I'd be curious, has the pandemic made it an easier message for businesses to consume? Because it does seem as if maybe this is the tipping point. We're shooting this in July of 2023, but the last 3 years, Brian, I mean, organizations tell my company, Placers, and yours that they just don't have enough people. Isn't it common sense to look at skills versus a degree, or is it not that simple?
Well, it is that simple. But, you know, employers are creatures of habit, and they like to follow along with you know, the pack.
Everybody else, right?
Exactly. And so now, I mean, going back a few years, skills-based hiring was not the thing to do. And yes. I can't really say it's the thing to do just yet, because we're still finding some opposition. But we have noticed, especially with our Tear the Paper Ceiling campaign, that organizations are listening to us and they're understanding that it just makes sense. I mean, if you're saying you don't have enough candidates for a particular job, but there are 70 million people out there that you haven't even looked at, then you're probably not really searching. You might not be telling yourself the truth. And I'm not putting any employers down. I mean, we've again, like I said, gained quite a bit of momentum, and employers are definitely listening to us and listening to others out there in the world who are talking about skills-based hiring. But it's, you know, it requires some pushing too, because we've seen that some employers do want to stick with the habits and routines of the past.
Any case studies that you've seen where organizations having adopted this have had pretty quick success? I think I saw something with the state of Pennsylvania in particular.
Right.
I see that we're interacting with a lot of government agencies. It could be state troopers, correctional officers, clinical workers, clerical offices in government, small city. Everybody's struggling, but I still see the degree requirement.
You still see it. So we worked with several states. I mean, we first worked with the state of Maryland, Governor Hogan. And he was the first to really promote opportunity at work. Did a press conference with our CEO, Byron, and pushed forward the term STARS, which was the first time we actually had it used publicly by a public figure that I'm aware of. And that also talked about some of our products and services, which is StellarWorks and Stellar Site. So we've noticed, I mean, after that, we had a number of hits on our site, and a number of stars actually reach out to our organization as well as employers. And that just has been a springboard. And we've noticed a lot of other states. We're actually working with the National Governors Association. But we've noticed a lot of other states taking that leap. And when we see these states doing it, I mean, we've also been talking to the feds as well. But when we see these states doing it, more cities are talking about it. And then more cities and states are forcing their employers within these cities and states to say, hey, wait a minute. We should be at the forefront of this as well. So we're seeing this piggyback effect, which is great.
So I reconnected with you by accident. Someone forwarded me the Tear the Paper Ceiling.
Oh.
And I saw it and then realized that you were connected to Opportunity at Work. And obviously, I don't know if our audience needs to know this, but I was going to ask you how many years ago that we met at Sunoco. Do you care to take a shot at that? We don't have to incriminate ourselves, but it might be fun. It'll make us look experienced.
Well, next Tuesday I'll be turning 56, so I'm not afraid to call it. I'll call it out there. I know you're much younger than me, but I'll call it out there. But I believe I took over as the head of HR for Sunoco's refineries in 2004. And I'm not really sure about this, Chris, but I think somebody from your company cold called me.
It was probably me. How about that?
Well, and at the time I was looking for help with creating a HR dashboard.
Yeah.
And, as I was just promoted to that position. And I wasn't fully versed in HR. I mean, I was a civil rights attorney, labor and employment attorney with Sunoco for a couple of years before that. But to take this role, I didn't know quite a lot about HR, but I knew I was working with a bunch of engineers, and I knew that they liked charts and graphs and dashboards. And so your cold call was like perfect. Like, well, is he in my head? So that's what I recall about. And that was around 2004.
And I knew you were smart. And I know that, I mean, there's a connection to a lot of things. The idea of putting someone who's smart into a role like human resources, who needs to learn the blocking and tackling of human resources, is, I think, good business. Bring a business mind to the table, learn some things. So, yeah, I remember that conversation. I remember talking about the ideas, and I don't know, fast forward, we did a lot of neat stuff together. But I have a not-for-profit, Placers Cares, and I was on a podcast. We were talking about that one of my beliefs is that the degree is overused. And then somebody sent me this link, and I found you, and I know it's a relatively new campaign, but I think it's great. And I know it's collecting signatures now, and it's being spread quite a bit. That's not a product, right? That's just a way of creating awareness so that more people can understand the cause and the mission.
That's absolutely correct. We do offer certain services. We do have a platform that we call StellarWorks and another platform called Stellar Suite, both of which can assist employers as they move forward in this STARS talent-based workplace. We also provide advisory services, but our initial push is to inform employers, inform the workforce about STARS and about people who are skilled through alternative routes, who can do the jobs, who have been doing the jobs. There's ample insight, information, and data out there that shows that there have been tons throughout the years of individuals who lack a degree but have been able to do just as much, if just at the same level as an individual who has a college degree. And what's interesting and great about Opportunity at Work, too, is that we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. We have a lot of stars working in our at our company, working in key jobs, and are involved in every decision we make.
You have to be it, right? You have much more credibility to be it versus say it. Exactly. I'm a student of history, and I give talks all the time about workforce and workplace realities and kind of like how we got here. So I'd just be curious, how did the degree, what are your thoughts on where the degree became so dominant? I think I have my ideas, but I'd be curious to maybe bat that around with you a little bit. You feel comfortable with that?
Well, yeah. So we've done a great deal of research. We know that the degree requirement, and it's kind of, I don't want to be controversial or not confrontational, but there's ample information out there that employers around a certain era decided to screen out as opposed to screening it now. We do know that, prior to the industrial during the industrial era, you did not have that many employers requiring college degrees.
Right.
They're at that time, I think less than half the workforce even had a high school diploma, let alone a college degree. And so it just, as more employees of different sorts, of different hues started to enter the workplace, more screening out of workers started to take hold. And so when I look at it from the legal side, it's as a civil rights attorney, it became pretty evident that, for people of color, this was another, especially after the Brown versus Board of Education case that ended segregation in education and ended segregation actually in the public as well. There were more employers as well as society as a whole started finding other ways to try to keep things status quo. And so this was one of the things. And the courts looked at several different cases to try to stem that tide. One being the Griggs versus Duke Power Company case that came out in 1971. And I know I'm probably about to lose 60,000 of your going too deep into the law, but
I'm with you.
But that's kind of my historical take on it. The screening out of all these additional individuals entering the workplace, especially these soft core jobs?
I flat out think that organizations have used all kinds of tools and techniques to screen out whatever they felt was desirable or not desirable. I mean, and I obviously I understand the law.
Yeah.
On a broader perspective, what I feel is that was a very large, post World War II, it was a huge bump in population at a time where all of a sudden every household was thinking about that a college degree mattered. And I know some people did not have access more than others, but all of a sudden this degree became success.
Sure.
And I actually think some businesses started to believe that it was a sign of success or accomplishment. And I mean, in my book, I think we talk about that. I'm not sure a college degree is any more today than a high school degree was 50 years ago. It's sort of along the same kind of thing. So I think you're right. The reason I feel this is because now population numbers are changing. Mm-hmm. So organizations have to adapt. They should have done it anyway. Of course, I agree with you. But now they're doing it out of necessity with supply and demand. There aren't enough people.
Right.
So doesn't make the cause any less goddamn important. You know?
1,000%, Chris. And when I was first brought on to Opportunity at Work, so I like to call it the carrot and stick approach. When I was first brought on, the push was for me as an attorney, as a litigator as well, advocate, was to try to push companies or help companies to understand what types of risk they were taking by having a blanket college degree requirement. How you're putting yourself in jeopardy of a disparate impact claim under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, how you are potentially, violating Title VII by not promoting based upon the person lacking a college degree.
How did that go?
Well, it's interesting enough. So, Chris, when I came there, I started doing these memos at Opportunity at Work. I started talking with the CEO quite often about this. And we were looking at the potential of trying to inform employers how if you don't want to remove a college degree requirement, at least use the and or equivalent language when you're posting for a position. Our insights group, our magnificent employees, the carrot approach was working. They were going to them and telling them about the importance of stars and how stars have these skills and stars can do this job if you just look at these skills. And it just, employers said, hey, you're right. And it might be, as you said earlier, it might be as a result of, this believed dearth and workers out there. But no, the stick approach wasn't absolutely necessary. I wasn't quite needed for that aspect of the role.
Still, I think there's power in knowledge and education, but it's great that positive was working versus the stick approach.
Correct.
So you use the STARS acronym a lot.
Yep.
Skilled through alternative routes. And kind of just prepping and talking with you, I know there's a lot of different kinds of stars. Is that part of what you'd like to share in the message? And, I think talking about the stars is probably key here, right? A little bit, bringing them to life.
Agreed. Our numbers indicate that there, as you mentioned earlier, 70 plus billion stars out there. They take the form of rising stars, forming stars, shining stars. But even before you get to looking at that, I mean, as we talked about earlier, being skilled through alternative routes, you got to look at what are those alternative routes. And when you look at the fact that people have military service, that they have, on the job experience, that they obtained certificates and done other forms of knowledge building, they come from all facets of society, all segments of society. And, we have discovered that about half of the 70 million stars are forming stars. They're stars who, have these skills, have these abilities, but just, they might still be a little young and they might be working on getting additional certifications and still working at the job. And they're not quite making the type of salaries that they should be making because they're not considered and probably still employers are thinking, they lack a college degree. Then you go on to rising stars, and that's about 32 million, just a little bit less than half. And those individuals are, in positions, what we call gateway jobs, that might allow them to, or should allow them to move up. They've acquired enough sets of skills through their years of experience to be considered for that additional role or that promotion or things like that. And then there's this small number, about 3 to 4 million of shining stars who are actually, employers have actually said, and a lot of these actually have their own companies, but employers have actually said, this individual truly does have the skill sets and the abilities to be in top level positions within the company. And we're just hoping to get more employers to see that the forming and the rising should still be considered in the shining.
So I think the fundamental part of this is that learning comes in a lot of ways. Obviously, prepping and thinking. I mean, there's boot camps for programmers all over this country today. There's certificate programs. And they're high, and they have highly paid jobs. They don't have college degrees, but they've got this 8, 12-week, 16-week program, and they're stars. Right. I have a family member who can rebuild engines, and he's done it all by YouTube.
Right.
Now, does he need a 4-year degree to go be a automotive or truck mechanic? Probably not, right? But I find it very interesting. The institutions of education. There are a lot of ways to get education. There's free educations out there from universities and free certificates, and that I don't think it needs to be the 4-year degree classic way in order for people to learn. Now, that's very much my own bias, and I as a founder of a business, I can get away with that. But I think that's a real issue learning comes in lots of ways, and it does not have to be from a university.
I agree. My oldest son, who's now given me 2 grandsons, he had to pull out of school at Temple because
he's your favorite.
Yeah, because he had to, he decided to go a different route.
Yes,
as far as having children right away, but he's worked with this one employer for almost 10 years, and he was working. Oh, this is a great story too. He was working security, and I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago for the EEOC where we talked about skills-based hiring, and that was on June 8th. And during that presentation, I talked about my son, my oldest son, and how he was a star and how he had been in this role for such a long time. And he had his coder certificate, had all this other experience in IT. He even formed his own or created his own board game, Chris. This is an amazing board game. I'll
so
give you that.
He's got mad skills.
He's got these skills. He's got these amazing skills. And so, he had wanted to advance in the company, but they didn't allow him. They said he didn't have a college degree. And so during that presentation to the EEOC, which again was on June 8th, I said, I might have to take the stick approach, because I talked about the carrot and stick. I said, I might have to take the stick approach for my son at this employer. June 9th, he gets promoted to another job, working in IT, making a little bit more money. And it was amazing. I mean, the timing was ridiculous. I'm like, was this company sitting in the audience and looked me up and looked up my son? But I'm not sure. I won't say the name of the company, but
sometimes it just takes longer to do the right things, Brian.
Sometimes it does.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah, but the timing was amazing. And yes, we all have stars in our orbit, in our family and our friends. And, we love them, and we cherish them, and we hope that they can do the best. But if you're being left behind or not considered solely because of this, or the lack of this piece of paper, this paper ceiling that we talked about, the tear the paper ceiling, that's a problem. That's a real problem, especially if this individual has the skills to do the job.
I imagine there's some stars listening. I just imagine the questions and thoughts and things about, they want to hear about our failures too, Brian. They want to hear about the things we're learning, the lessons we're learning and stuff too. But what should a star do if they like what we're talking about? Maybe how could the organization help, or what could they do to help themselves?
Well, we would love the opportunity to meet with them and talk to them, they can always come to our website, opportunityatwork.org. They can go to the Tear the Paper Ceiling website, tearthepaperceiling.org. We
always tearthepaperceiling.org. All right, great.
Right. We're based in DC, so you can always contact us at our office. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is that if you are a star, don't feel stigmatized by it. Don't feel like it's a bad thing. I mean, when I first approached my son, I took this job at Opportunity at Work to tell him that, hey, we have this great concept, and you fit the definition of a star. You're skilled through alternative routes. He's like, I don't really like to talk about that when I don't have my college degree. I said, well, his name is Mateo. I said, son, Mateo, you're fine. I mean, think about it. You've done this, and you've been able to create your own game board. You're about to convert it to an app. I guess that's an app. I mean, you have the skills. You're doing it yourself. You went out and acquired these skills on your own. You got your certificate, everything. Be proud of that. That's not something to sit back and say, oh, I don't want people to know.
It's hard to overcome, isn't it?
It's hard to overcome. So we're hoping, part of our innovations team, part of our whole makeup, the 100 plus employees at Opportunity at Work, is to try to let stars know that you are a star, that you deserve to be considered for the position and for the promotion if it's necessary, if that's what you're looking for.
Of course, I've run an HR company for going on 30 years. I have a lot of organizations that I feel maybe on their own might like to explore this topic. How do organizations engage so that they can get educated? Because I think a lot of them want to poke around and learn about it on their own, right? They're not all going to welcome you and I in for a keynote in front of 10,000 employees tomorrow, right? Yeah. But I see it everywhere where, especially skilled labor jobs, technology jobs, as you said, I don't know how you use the term with office jobs, but there is a host of jobs that there are not enough candidates for, even in today's market. And we're asked all the time, what could we do? And many times this is suggested, but this isn't allowed to be on the table. Perhaps the people we're talking with don't have the authority to change job descriptions and things. So do they sign the tearthepaperceiling.org, or, do they contact you?
We would love for people to sign the tearthepaperceiling.org banner on that website. That'll be outstanding to do. We also, as part of the Tear the Paper Ceiling campaign, we have partners. We've partnered with over 50 different companies and workforce organizations to join the campaign. In fact, placers can, by all means, placers should consider joining the campaign. And basically, joining the campaign, you get insights into all this great data that supports the hiring of stars. It supports the skills. I mean, we can take a particular position, take a particular individual and look at all the skills that individual has acquired through all the different positions that they've worked, and display for them, as well as an employer, all the different jobs that they possibly would have the best ability to work in.
That makes so much sense, because I can picture us as a partner. The number of times, Brian, that we're an agent on somebody's behalf, and we're saying, I understand that you wanted a 2-year associate's degree for this, but Mateo has a certificate and he has 2 years of experience, and we just think you should meet him. The number of, and, sometimes we win and sometimes we get the no. But I would love to I have a couple people that have passion for DEI. I'd love to get them connected. And frankly, I'd like to be connected because this is my particular interest, frankly.
You raise a great point, Chris. So we haven't really talked in great detail about DEI and the belonging part as well.
That was a soft setup for you there, by the way.
It's a great setup. Opportunity at Work. Our friend Byron is such a brilliant individual, and all the individuals working there. Our setup is extremely inclusive. We say a star is can be a person who is a person of color, could be a woman, could be a former military person. It could be people who live in rural communities. That's the makeup of a lot of our stars. But when you break that down even further, you'll see that percentage-wise, a large number are people of color. All the people who fit the protected characteristics, all the people who have been considered, most vulnerable, the ones that have been left out in quite a lot of different arenas. And so our focus is not solely on any one particular protected category. It's focused on all of the different individuals that can make up a star, all the different people who, by whatever circumstances that created the situation where they could not complete their degree or even start a degree, you are still a star. You're not just a Black star. You're not just a Latino star. You're not just a female star. You are a star. We don't just break that. But we do know the importance of how, if you are an employer and you decide to take this route of showing, of looking at individuals who fit the star category, you will see an increase in your diversity numbers in both your candidate pool, and if you take not a gamble, because it's definitely not a gamble, but if you decide to hire stars, you'll see an increase in your workforce diversity as well, and belong.
We all know that broader team makeup creates innovation, it creates perspective, it creates compassion and understanding, and it makes for a better game, makes for a better outcome.
Always.
Always. So I think what's really important is that you have data where I think it's okay to put a fine point to it. If, a Latino or a Black person is someone who's impacted by this, I think it's important to be able to understand what the opportunity is that you're working on and what you're trying to impact, to understand those numbers, because I think that matters.
Right.
And if someone needs them, that would be helpful.
Agree. We have, and I'm not the best at the discussion on all our data points. We have some amazing individuals who can talk quite eloquently and know the stuff pretty well. But I will tell you that we do know that within our STARS community, 62% of them are Black, 54% are Hispanic, 65% are rural workers, 62% are veterans. And so we know that if you choose to, as an employer, to look at this group, this census, you will see an increase in your diversity numbers.
Is there a link to a paper or a summary of some of that someone might be able to consume?
I can send you several links, Chris.
Okay.
We have done several studies that are on our website as well, on opportunityawork.org. The rise of stars. We actually looked at African-American stars. We looked at data on Latino stars, as well as veterans and people in rural communities. And through our Stellar Sites website, an employer can go on there and, drill down. Like, for instance, in Delaware, where you are, you can look at the Camden, Wilmington, Philadelphia area, and you can see that I actually pulled up your numbers there are about 1.3 million stars, people that we would categorize as stars, who live in the Camden, Wilmington, and Philadelphia area. And of that 1.3 million, they make
it would be really interesting to understand. I guess it's hard. You can't just look at unemployment, and it's hard to measure underemployment, although I'm sure you're doing it, right, to get a handle on that. I mean, I'm always an entrepreneur, Brian, and there is such a business opportunity to represent stars. not to borrow the acronym, but there is such an when you do the right thing, there's such an opportunity there, and I like it.
Well, you can borrow stars anytime you want, Chris, because that's an open source term.
Okay.
You can use it anytime you want.
So just to check in, we're 35 minutes in. Are we talking about the right things? And I'll let you as the guest kind of direct us to other parts of the business story, other parts of the information, and even anything you'd like to share about you that you feel is relevant. So,
Chris, no, I think, when we talked prior, I was excited to get an opportunity to speak on your platform just to talk about what we do at Opportunity at Work and how we're hoping to move the dial. I mean, not only move the dial, we want to rewire the labor market. We want people to understand that this is, in fact, if you're an employer, if you're a star, this is, in fact, something that you should really employ in your future workplace, making certain that people who lack college degrees are given just as much consideration, if not the same consideration for certain jobs and certain roles within the workplace. But on top of that, in my realm, what I do, I've always done civil rights. I've been a civil rights attorney for 30 years, and I've worked mostly in the area of litigation. And so joining Opportunity at Work and not having to necessarily do a lot of advocacy, but just assist those who are, going into the workplace and talking to these different employers and just providing them data. I mean, data is so strong. The data is so compelling that it's unnecessary for me to be that person that I'm used to being, but we're still getting the same results. In other words, I don't have to be what I used to refer to earlier as a stick. I don't have to go in there and beat employers over.
You don't have to be the heavy.
Don't have to be the heavy like I was when I was with the EEOC. Oh, I didn't talk about my background, but when I was a trial attorney with the EEOC. So, it's just amazing. And I can't say that our society is getting it as a whole. But, when you look at everything, especially with companies, it's about the bottom line. When you look at the bottom line, it makes fundamental sense to include.
Brian, if it were easy, it would already be done.
Oh, that's so true. That is so true.
And it's funny. I sort of wrote down, what's your purpose? It's such a silly question because you're quite evident, very driven by the purpose of the organization. It's not that your purpose couldn't be a little different, but it does fit in with what you've wanted to do all along.
It does. And I was not looking for work when I found this job. So that's always a great thing. I just happened to be on their site. And interesting enough, I was on LinkedIn and they had posted a position. And one of our board members is the founder of LinkedIn, Reed Hoffman. And so I was just looking at this position. I was like, wow, the work that they're doing is amazing. Because I was thinking of my son again. I was thinking of Mateo, my oldest son. I was like, wow, that is absolutely amazing. And while I was looking at the site, looking at the position, I get a call from a recruiter saying, hey, we are interested, or would you be interested in this particular role? And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Are you looking? I'm thinking about LinkedIn at the point. Are you
watching me? Is there a camera on me?
Right. So have I really been on LinkedIn? But I mean, it was amazing. It was destiny. And again, the approach that Opportunity at Work takes that's so broad that, we're talking about 70 million Americans. I've been a civil rights attorney, mostly working individual cases. Every now and then I'll get a class action case. But now I have a 70 million plus sphere of impact, potential. So
I think that's very subtle, but what you said about how the way I heard you say about you is that you were always the standalone one, the one voice, the one expert, and you had to step in and educate a lot of people. This happens to be where you're around a lot of educated people, where you're just raising the bar a little bit on 100 people, right? They're coming to you to learn more.
Right.
Or to close. I don't know if I'm saying that right, versus being the one that constantly has to walk around and say, let me tell you what's really going on.
Yeah. Well, you're saying it right. I can tell you that I've learned more than I've taught at this job. But
Oh, wow.
I also know, I mean, the CEO, Byron is, he's one of
By the
the,
way, Brian, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm expecting a call, if that's okay.
you might get, yeah, trust me, you might get one. Yeah.
Uh,
Byron is brilliant. And so, but he's just one of many there. And it's, has nothing to do with pedigree, which is where they got their degrees, or if they even got a degree. Everybody's just not only passionate about what they do, they're brilliant in how they're doing it. And so I love it. I love learning. I love every day coming to this job and learning more. But you're right. There's, from my vantage point of being a litigator and an advocate in the civil rights world, I have been able to give them insight into approaching cases or approaching other ways of convincing employers to make changes.
yeah, and I think you have to understand the whole life cycle or timeline to be able to understand the steps, right? To know what your options are, to know how to escalate, and to know how to influence. I'm going to throw you a fun question. I know you didn't want to talk much about yourself, but I think you'll get a kick out of this. What advice would you give your 21-year-old self? Obviously, you've got this pretty cool career. You've done a lot of things. I've enjoyed watching you over the years, and professor, lawyer, you got it down. But what would you say to your 21-year-old self? It's sort of my way of getting successful people to talk about the lessons they've learned.
Yeah, that is an outstanding question, because even though I have a son who's 20 and a son who's 28 and a daughter who's 18 and a daughter's 29, I wouldn't say to them what I would say to myself.
I didn't ask that question.
So, knowing what I know now, I would have probably tell my 21-year-old self to not be in such a hurry, and to actually think it through. When I first joined the EEOC in 1993, straight out of law school, fresh from passing the bar, I wrote on a chart. They had the full U.S. government scale on pay and promotions and the rank. You can go from a GS2 to a GS15 and then SES. And I circled and then wrote a line to SES3 in 5 years. And I was just racing to see if I can get anywhere near that. And I probably skipped some steps, and it would have helped me better off in life. And so I came up with these 5 fingers. I think I might have told you about this, these 5 fingers. And I came up with them when I was at Sunoco. And they're my 5 fingers of success that I've held on to, and I teach it to when I was teaching at Temple for 12 years. And for all my employees, people who work for me, they know about them too. And so it's knowledgeable, resourceful, legally sound, thorough, and punctual. And if I would have thought about that the way I think about it almost every day now when I'm doing my job, at 21, when I was just out of college and waiting to go to law school and working for the feds in DC, I would have probably be a little bit further along in my career. Now, I'm happy where I am. I enjoy the job I do. I enjoy the people I work with, and I enjoy where I live and all things else. But I probably would have been a little bit more impactful had I followed my 5 fingers at an early stage in life.
Brian, one of my all-time favorite learned sayings is, when I go slow, I go fast.
Yeah, I need to adopt it. And I'm still pretty swift. I need to calm down, still slow down.
And I need to learn the 5 fingers. I'm sure there's one in there that I violate every day. And I try not to be the punctual one, but that's the one that struck a chord for me that, that's the one that drives me nuts in the world.
Yeah. Well, it's the one that I had to adopt, because you can be the most knowledgeable person. I mean, and I've learned this too. You can be the most knowledgeable person. You know how to use your resources and be a resource. You are legally sound. I mean, nobody's breaking laws, but you can, be the most legally sound individuals out there. and you can be thorough. Thorough is what leaves an impression. But if you're late, if you, for instance, in
doesn't
law,
matter.
right, in the legal world, if you could have written a Magna Carta, the greatest piece of document, but if it's a day past the due date by the judge, they're not going to read it. They're not going to even pay attention to it. And so punctual has been, like, I try to show up to meetings 5 minutes early just so I can make sure I got everything, my notes ready and all kinds of things ready. And, it's worked out for me since I've adopted these 5 fingers, especially that punctual. Even though I was 2 minutes late for this.
Well, you had to figure out the technology, and us old dogs sometimes, I hope you don't mind the reference. We got to know, how do you keep learning?
So I read a lot. I know it's funny, I haven't read, I like hard copy books, but I haven't read a hard copy book in a while. I've been listening to books and online, but I try to read quite often. I read a lot of, I go on a lot of news channels, but I also so I learned to, generational wise, if you only focus on the avenues that you always learn from, you're never going to expand. You're just never going to one, stay abreast of things, but then also just to get the different viewpoints. And so,
are you talking about contrarian points of view from your own, even?
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
And interesting. My 18-year-old daughter, who's very, very a huge feminist, animal rights person, and I can just grunt, and she'll think, Daddy, you're being insensitive. Daddy, you're being this or that, and she'll just break it down for me, and this, whatever she's feeling that she thought that my grunt meant, based on whatever it comes from, and she'll tell me. She'll point me to all different types of sources that she's gotten her data from, even TikTok. And I'm like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to necessarily take TikTok, but I am open to learning from all different sources if I think the source is legit and valid. So that's been my.
We're realizing that people are getting more information about jobs, job prep, information like this from TikTok because of the short video content. I write an 800-word essay, and it's not quite the same as a 3-minute TikTok that has a little movement and a quick teaching moment. And it's just, what it is. It's just another platform to share. And that's why I'm open to it. But I like that story because my daughter's 28. She's a speech therapist. She is, quite frankly, for the underdog. So it must be a dad thing because every time I grunt or snort, there's a lecture. And of course, we're going to listen to it from our daughters, right? And you know what? Sometimes she's right. And I'm sure sometimes your daughter's right. Not always, but it just means we're all learning, and that openness is great. We're asking people to change. It starts with us.
Exactly. And, we did a study on generationalism and the multiple generations that can be in the workplace, in today's workplace. And if you don't have, generationalism is another form of credentialism. It could be another form of racism, sexism, all kinds. Isms just stink. But
by the way, that's the title of this talk. Isms just stink.
I like that. But yeah, if you're our workforce that is into the B in the DEIB, the belonging, then you also have to take into consideration the different generations that make up your workplace. And if you're not taking the approach that each different generation can learn from each other generation, and that's just not the employer, that's also each employee, then you're probably going to have way more disputes than you should have in your workplace. And you're going to end up having to deal with lawyers like me or external agencies who are going to get frustrated because this case has nothing to do with sex, not even age, even though it's a generation issue, race or anything like that. It just has to do with people aren't talking. They're not tolerating each other and not listening to each other, all because they're from different generations and were taught differently, gather their information differently. That's why I said earlier, I like to learn from all different sources because it helps me to, I'm not trying to stay young. Like I said, I'll be 56 next week. I'm just trying to stay relevant. and that's me helping myself by learning from different sources.
Brian, I'll let you bring it home with anything else you'd like to share. I think this has been awesome. The last 10 minutes, I think, is sort of interesting and raw, and really you brought a touch of yourself to it, which I think people really enjoy. And I and the isms just stink is right. And I think I do think by you being a little vulnerable, me being a little vulnerable about what we need to learn, I think it makes the message of the organization stronger, right? It tells me that the work we have to do, if we need help from our daughters, then it makes sense that the world's got to figure out how to talk. And that's what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. An opportunity to work, we call ourselves a learning organization, and that's both in that we strive to learn, but we also strive to educate. And there's nothing wrong with building your knowledge. Besides my 5 fingers, I like to live by. I might even learn this from you, Chris, back when I was at Sunoco, but I can't recall who told me. But as a person who is a people leader, you have to be fair, firm, and consistent. And if you're fair, firm, and consistent, and that's encased in integrity, people who follow you, people who you lead, your family, anybody who's surrounded around you, they'll know that you're transparent, and transparency is what people
Brian Matthew Rhodes, what I do remember is us talking about that leaders stand alone if they don't have followers, and you better be fair, firm, and consistent if you expect to have followers, exactly. Right? That's what they expect from leaders. So that's quite an honor that I think obviously, audience, what we're talking about is in our formative years of leadership and growing and changing, we would have dialogues. And I would encourage everybody to have a work mentor like that, whether it's a client or someone that you talk to about issues. It's how you grow and it's how you learn. And who knows, you might connect 19 years later and have a guest on your podcast, right?
Exactly.
Brian, I think it's terrific. We'll make sure in our show notes that we get some of the data and some of the links that make sense.
Okay.
But thanks for being a guest.
Oh, no. Pleasure's all mine, Chris. Pleasure.